Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. New data is putting numbers to the reality of financial hardship here in Connecticut as households deal with record inflation, new higher costs, and a pandemic. Where has that left them, and what resources are there to help them? Well, joining me now to explain it all, Amy Casavina Hall. You are the Senior Vice President of Partnership Development and Communications for United Way of Connecticut. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Well, I want to get right into talking about this new report, United Way's newest report. So you've released this kind of snapshot of what Connecticut's households have been dealing with here. But first, for those who don't know, what does ALICE actually mean?
What a great question. So ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. Okay. And those aren't words people normally say.
Right.
But ALICE together helps put a face to the situation of folks that are working incredibly hard day to day to get by, but they're just not earning enough to make ends meet, despite all that. And that type of hardship is something that can go unseen in Connecticut. So what we want to do is kind of shine a light on that and help bring that forward.
Sure. And a lot of people say that some of our other markers like GDP just aren't as clear or as realistic as ALICE. So why is ALICE so helpful to both the state and nonprofits to kind of show these factors?
Well, in the past, before ALICE, what most of us look to is the federal poverty level.
Okay.
Right? And it's widely acknowledged that the federal poverty level is just not a good measure, right? It's not regionally adjusted. It's kind of based on an outdated methodology. So if you think of it in terms of, oh, people who are struggling in our state are those people at or below federal poverty level, well, you're just going to miss the story. So we understood this and thought, how can we help really describe hardship and financial hardship in Connecticut? Right. And so really worked with our research partners, United for ALICE, to say, let's do this by looking at real costs, county by county, looking at households, and based on those real costs, what do families in our different geographies, based on that family composition, what do they need to meet a survival budget? This is a bare bones budget to get by.
And so to be clear, this newest report data looks at 2021, so households really during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, record inflation, a lot of other
things going on.
So your report says more than 552,000 Connecticut households were below that ALICE income, below the threshold of financial survival. Tell me a little bit about kind of the bullet points of what you saw come out of this newest report.
So actually, since our last report, it's increased by 1 percentage point in Connecticut, the percent of households statewide. Now, 1 percentage point doesn't sound like very much, but in fact, that's over 54,000 households in Connecticut.
Wow, okay.
Right? So 1 percentage point means a lot of households have fallen that much farther behind. And as you pointed out, in 2021, it was an interesting year, many challenges, but it also included things like enhanced federal benefits that really helped families get by. So we see these forces at play during this time period, people really struggling, but what we know about ALICE stays true. ALICE is working hard at the jobs available to them, but still not earning enough to get to the end of the month. ALICE tends to not have savings. ALICE is disproportionately people of color or female-headed households. And ALICE is not getting ahead, and if anything, costs have continued to rise, as we all know and we all experience, and ALICE continues to lose ground.
So diving a little bit more into this report, one of the key findings United Way pulled out was for a lot of these families, there's a mismatch between wages and basic necessities. We know we're dealing with record inflation, but what are possible solutions here?
Oh, that's such a great question. So that survival budget that we just talked about, again, I want to emphasize bare bones budget.
Right.
Housing, transportation, health care, the little bit of technology built into it. But what it's missing is it's missing any savings and it's missing any debt service. Right? So the absolute minimum people really need to get by. And so some of those things that are missing are so important. So not having savings means at any point you're just vulnerable. You're vulnerable to life happening and falling further down that slide, and that's what we absolutely don't want to have happen. So we want people to be able to get over this threshold so they can find that stability, right, to build off of, and also to lose that immense emotional stress that comes with being financially unstable. So we have to focus on how do we build income into those households. And it is looking at that mismatch between essential costs and wages that are available.
And we saw nonprofits striking and rallying outside the Capitol this year, really asking for more support from the state, saying that the most recent budget from the legislature didn't provide them with enough funding. A lot of places also saying in these tough times that they've seen donation and volunteerism take a hit. What kind of support do you think our nonprofits need to keep up with this demand? Does the state need to set up, what are we sort of seeing not only from the report, but also on the ground on your end?
Well, I think you hit on something that much of the nonprofit workforce falls into the ALICE category. It has been true and it continues to be true, and it continues to be a struggle that leaders across kind of the social service sector are facing, and it's growing. And they're trying so hard to provide services to people who are incredibly vulnerable. Right. But it's so hard when your workforce is just that one step away. In fact, sometimes you could turn the tables and not know who's on either side of the table. It can be that severe. So that strain on them, we depend on nonprofits to serve people in our community, from mental health, homelessness, food security, housing, all these areas, education. But when they're at that edge, their workforce, and as organizations to serve them, well, services can decrease. And it's really hard to keep up and plan for what is a time of still increasing demand. And that's part of it. We saw demand increase during the pandemic, but it hasn't gone back down. We continue to see at United Way of Connecticut and our partners across the state increasing housing insecurity, increasing food insecurity. But our systems and our people that are there to help are taking a terrible strain at the same time. So we need to think about our workforce, we need to think about our investments, but we need to think about those families and people, because as a longtime nonprofit person, and I know of my colleagues, we'd love to be out of business. Right? And so when the people we serve have the finances they need, the income coming in, whether that's from working income or more assistance from the federal government and the state, which we saw what a difference that makes, targeted assistance, that's where we'd prefer to have people. Right? Getting the income they need, making the decisions they need to be successful, not having to come to social services to figure things out. But the way it is right now, we're kind of that last group standing, the last piece of safety net really there to help people get by. And some are getting by, but many aren't. And that's what we're so concerned about.
And you said, these data points don't always show the whole picture. So for you, what are you seeing from these families as the most challenging or the most needed service? Is there any area in particular that you're seeing a greater need in, or that you think needs the most support right now?
Well, it's hard to talk about this without talking about housing, which is the conversation in Connecticut right now, and for good reason. We talk, and then we're looking at over 80,000, an estimate of over 80,000 affordable units that's needed in the state. In our report, we use a very conservative measure. And this is a conservative approach to this work, but it is based on real local numbers, so we love it. But in our budget, housing is about $1,100 a month based in 2021 for a family of 4. Now, it's really hard to find a unit at that rate. That is the federal measure, and it is a good, strong measure. But we know the market has far outpaced those measures. And actually, the thing that really always catches your attention is that childcare. Childcare is more than twice as much as housing in this budget. So if you're a family of 4 with 2 working adults and 2 young kids, your childcare is going to be well over $2,000 a month. Compared to your mortgage or your rent, which is a little over $1,100 a month in 2021. And those 2 forces combined are incredibly hard for a family to manage, or anyone to manage. And as we know, they continue to increase and increase and increase.
So when we're talking about, the latter end now, you mentioned kind of being the last group standing here. You're providing these social services to people, a lot of households that are now reported below the threshold. Many hadn't necessarily been below that threshold before, a lot of people falling below it during the pandemic, during 2021. So these are new challenges for them. So for those who, might not know whether it's the United Way services or other community resources, what should people know about where to find these services, and how can they get in contact with either you or others in their community?
I'd really ask to think about three things first.
Okay.
First, I would ask, anyone who's experienced financial stress knows it's not just about, I don't have enough cash, or I can't write this check to pay the bill. It's about the emotional toll and psychological toll that comes with that. So I want to ask people first to connect with other people and get the support that they need, because this is an incredibly hard situation. So call 211 or go to 211ct.org. Find out about services, get connected to things. And if you're experiencing real mental stress related to this, call that number also, or call 988 and get connected to some help, because this is incredibly hard on people.
Right.
And what we see is anxiety has increased as financial stress increases.
Sure.
So take care of yourself. Get connected to services, right? Again, 211ct.org, find out in your community. But tell your story, and that can be really hard. But your elected officials, state and federal, they need to know. We saw with the end of those enhanced federal benefits like the child tax credit, we just learned last week, right? Childhood poverty doubled since that went away. That's astounding. That made a huge difference for families. So let your elected officials know, this is how it helped me. You don't need to be an expert on the policy. You don't need to understand economics. You need just to be able to say, this worked and it's gone, and this is the situation I'm in. Or this is how I'm trying my best. But this is how my best is not getting me, not only not ahead, but I'm falling backwards. Just say, share your story, right? It really makes a difference.
Sure. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here. A lot of really important points, especially at the end there, for people to reach out, if they need to get in contact with you. But thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Oh, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that does it for us here on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the free Fox 61 app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great rest of your morning.